Welcome to the Deep Dive, listeners. Get ready to dive into a mystery from the ancient world. We're talking harp seals.
Harp seals.
Yeah, but not just any harp seals. These seals lived in the Baltic Sea thousands of years ago.
Okay, now you've got my attention. The Baltic Sea. Isn't that a little unusual for harp seals?
Exactly. They're extinct there now, but these ancient seals have quite a story to tell. We're diving into a study that used their teeth like a historical record, tracking their every move.
Hold on, are we talking about what they ate for dinner or something? How can you figure out where a seal went just by looking at its teeth?
Well, it's not as simple as checking for spinach stuck between their teeth, but you're on the right track. It all comes down to something called strontium isotope analysis.
Strontium isotope. Say that 5 times fast.
Don't worry, I'll spare you the tongue twister. Think of it like a geographical fingerprint.
A fingerprint. Okay, now I'm really lost. How does a fingerprint help track a seal swimming in the Baltic Sea thousands of years ago?
Imagine you're a detective trying to place a suspect at a crime scene. You'd look for traces of their presence, right? Strontium isotopes work in a similar way. They're found in rocks and soil, then end up in the water. Since these seals lived in the Baltic Sea, which is fed by many rivers, each with a unique strontium signature.
Hold on. Different rivers have different strontium. What did you call it?
Signatures. Think of it like this. Each river carries a slightly different amount of this strontium based on the types of rocks and soil it flows through. That strontium then makes its way into the food chain.
I'm starting to get it. The seals eat the fish, which ate something else that had strontium in it from a specific location.
Precisely. And, like at detective logging locations, those strontium isotopes become a part of the seal's teeth as they grow, creating a sort of travel journal embedded in their very biology.
Wow. Okay, so a seal tooth is like a diary. That's incredible. But the Baltic Sea, isn't that a bit small for a seal to travel around in? Wouldn't their strontium diary all look the same?
That's what makes the Baltic Sea so fascinating for this kind of research. It's not just a small sea. It's a unique blend of freshwater from rivers and saltwater from the ocean.
Brackish water, right. I've heard it called that. So that means...
It means you have all these different strontium signatures from the rivers flowing into this sort of mixing bowl of the Baltic Sea. Scientists can then compare the strontium isotopes in the seal's teeth to this map they've created of the Baltic strontium levels. It's like having a key to decipher those hidden travel journals.
That's mind-blowing. So what did they find? Were these seals just chilling in the Baltic, or were they going on some epic adventures?
So the researchers have their strontium map of the Baltic, and they've got these ancient seal teeth that are basically travel diaries. What did they find? Were these seals just content to hang out in their own little corner of the Baltic?
Not at all. In fact, what they found really surprised them. It turns out these seals got around. The strontium isotope ratios showed these seals were moving between areas with totally different strontium signatures.
So we're not talking about just a little swim across the Baltic. Where were they going that had such different signatures?
They were going back and forth between rivers and the open sea. Remember that mix of freshwater and saltwater we talked about? It wasn't just a scientist's dream. It was a smorgasbord for the fish, too.
Ah, so the seals were following the food. That makes sense. But wouldn't eating a mix of freshwater and saltwater fish kind of muddle up their strontium signals? I mean, wouldn't it all just average out?
That's where the magic of layered teeth comes in. Their teeth, kind of like trees, grow in layers over time. By carefully analyzing these layers, the scientists could see the fluctuations in the strontium isotopes.
Okay, that's really cool. So we're talking about a detailed timeline of their movement, not just a snapshot of their average diet, right?
Exactly. They could pinpoint where a seal was at different points in its life just by looking at the strontium levels in different layers of its teeth.
Talk about Big Brother. These seals had no idea that every move was being recorded. But were all the seals moving around like this, or did it vary depending on where they were found?
That's where it gets even cooler. The study suggests there were actually 2 distinct populations of harp seals in the Baltic Sea during this period.
2 different populations. Whoa, hold on. Are we talking like genetically different seals here, or just hanging out in different neighborhoods?
Now, that's a question we need more research to answer definitively, but the strontium data definitely shows us these 2 populations lived very different lifestyles. For example, the seals found at a site called Ajvid on the island of Gotland had strontium ratios that were pretty consistent.
So they mostly stuck to the southern Baltic. Home bodies.
Yeah.
What about the other group?
Well, the seals from Korsnäs on mainland Sweden showed a much wider range of strontium isotope ratios, as did those from the Åland Islands.
Meaning?
Meaning those seals were going the distance, they were traveling long distances all over the northern Baltic.
Wow, so we've got the homebodies in the south and the adventurers in the north. Two completely different lifestyles. But how does this all tie back to understanding humans who lived thousands of years ago?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And what the researchers found might surprise you. You see, they believe that the location of human settlements from something called the pitted ware culture, well, those settlements might be directly linked to where these seals were giving birth.
Hold up. We can pinpoint where seals were having their pups thousands of years ago. Now that's impressive. Okay, let's recap. We've got these two distinct groups of harp seals. The homebodies in the south, and the adventurers roaming around the northern Baltic, each group living life their own way, following different routines. But how did ancient humans keep up? They didn't have tracking apps or those fancy GPS collars scientists use today.
You're right, they didn't have all that fancy tech, but they didn't need it. They had something just as powerful, a deep understanding of the natural world and their place in it. Remember how the researchers suggested that human settlements from the pitted ware culture might be connected to seal pupping areas?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. But how can you possibly tell where seals were giving birth thousands of years later just by looking at bones and teeth? It sounds like magic.
It's not magic, just really clever detective work. Think about it. Those seals wouldn't just give birth anywhere, right? They'd need specific conditions. Places with predictable ice formation along the coasts, probably sheltered bays and inlets. These spots would be ideal for nursing pups and protecting them from predators.
So these pupping areas would have been like a giant neon sign flashing free food for the pitted ware people. But were they going after the pups directly? Or were the adult seals fair game too?
Excellent question. And that's where things get even more interesting. Remember those seals from Gotland, the homebodies? The ones with the really consistent strontium ratios? Well, the researchers analyzed the seal bones from those archaeological sites too.
Yeah.
Those Gotland sites had way more young seal bones than the other sites. Significantly more.
Ah, so they were targeting those vulnerable pups. A little bit brutal, but I guess we were talking about survival.
It's the circle of life, right, even back then. And this pattern, combined with the strontium data, gives us even more evidence that Gotland may have been a primary breeding ground for that southern harp seal population. The seals had their routine, and the people who lived there had theirs, perfectly in sync with the rhythm of nature.
It's kind of beautiful in a way. A glimpse into a world where humans and nature were so connected. But what about the seals up north? The adventurers, racking up those Baltic Sea miles. How did the humans who lived alongside them keep up with such a moving target?
Their story paints a slightly different picture. When they looked at the bones from sites near those northern seal populations, they found a much more even spread of ages. Younger seals, older seals, everything in between.
So it wasn't just about snatching up pups. They had to hunt those seals on the move.
It makes sense, right? Those seals were constantly on the go. Which is why, if you look at where those northern pitted ware settlements were located, they tend to be along coastlines near major rivers, strategically positioned to intercept those traveling seals.
It's incredible how much information we can get from something as simple as a seal's tooth. These tiny time capsules have unlocked a whole world of understanding about not just seals, but ancient human behavior, migration patterns, ecosystems. We're talking about a connection to the past that goes far beyond what we could ever learn from a textbook.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? The animals, the environment, the people, all these pieces intertwined. And it makes you wonder, what other secrets are still waiting to be discovered? What can we learn from the past that might help us make better decisions about the future?
That's the million-dollar question. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of ancient Baltic Sea harp seals, their surprisingly mobile lifestyles, and the humans who depended on them. Thanks for joining us.